after taking back the House, Democrats plan to pass legislation to reopen the entire government without the money President Trump wants for a border wall. That bill is unlikely to pass the Republican-led Senate.
Nancy Pelosi is expected to officially reclaim the Speaker of the House title after promising members of her party that she would only hold on to the position for 4 more years. Moments ago, President Trump took to Twitter, blaming the government shutdown on the 2020 presidential election, writing in part, "The Democrats know they can't win based on all of the achievements of Trump, so they are going all out on the desperately needed wall and border security and presidential harassment."
Why the quotes around Trump?
I don't know.
Okay. And Nancy Cordes joins us from our Washington bureau. All right, Nancy, so the most pressing issue for the Democratic House will, of course, be reopening the federal government. What is their plan and what comes next if they don't get it done?
Right. I mean, it's hard to pursue sort of a sweeping agenda when you've still got more than a quarter of the government shut down. And so Democrats say their first order of business after everyone is sworn in today is to pass a bill that would fund that segment of the government, but not provide the president the $5 billion in wall funding that he has been seeking in exchange for him signing that government spending legislation. Now, the problem is that the Senate's leader, Republican Mitch McConnell, has said basically that a bill like that doesn't give the president his wall money is basically dead on arrival in the Senate, which is a little bit curious because just before Christmas break, you'll remember that the Senate actually passed that legislation 100-0. It was so non-controversial, in fact, that the Senate didn't actually have all of its senators come to the floor to take that vote. They just passed it by something known as unanimous consent. But then the president said, hold on, no, I'm backtracking and I'm going to hold out for funding for the wall. And so that's what precipitated this whole standoff. Democrats say they are not backing down. They will not give him the money that he's seeking, whether it is $2.5 billion or $5 billion. And so it's not clear what the next step is once Democrats sort of go on the record today with their new majority in the House and pass that legislation to try in vain to reopen the government.
We know that Nancy Pelosi is likely going to become the Speaker of the House. What's going to be on her agenda?
Well, she says that one of the first pieces of legislation that she wants to pass, and this is something that she is primarily united with the Democratic Party on, is a package of new rules that will sort of govern the way that the House operates over the next couple of years, bringing more transparency to the body. They want to reinstate something that is known around D.C. as pay-go, pay as you go, which basically says that if you want to pass legislation that adds to the deficit, that costs more money, you've got to take that money out of someplace else. And that is slightly controversial within the Democratic Party. There are some progressive members who don't believe that the party should hamstring itself in that way, basically tie its own hands when it comes to passing legislation, for example, to expand health care coverage, which could end up costing a lot of money. So there's that transparency bill that she and so many Democrats want to get on the record with right away. They also want to pass a bill having to do with campaign finance, with voting rights, with lowering prescription drug costs. But again, it's really hard for them to kind of pursue an agenda when you've still got hundreds of thousands of federal workers who are in limbo, who have been furloughed, who haven't gotten a paycheck in a couple of weeks.
And Nancy, as you know, having covered these shutdowns over the years, they're generally fought in the press. I mean, and the question becomes, I think, for a lot of people, who has the upper hand here? Because I wonder what Republicans are telling you, given the fact that the president is on tape saying that he would own the government shutdown. Now he's trying to hashtag it Schumer shutdown, but let's face it, he's the one who said he would do it. He said that he wouldn't blame the Democrats if the government shut down. What are they saying about that?
Well, Democrats think that they're on pretty solid ground here because polling shows that that a wall is not that important to a lot of Americans. Some outright oppose it. The president obviously promised when he was campaigning that Mexico would pay for it, not the federal government. So Democrats think that this is a winning issue for them. But these things can change. You know, Republicans could make a very credible argument. Look, the president is just looking for a token down payment on this wall. Why are Democrats holding out over $2.5 billion, which is a lot to you and I, but a drop in the bucket, frankly, when it comes to federal spending. And they could argue that Democrats are being recalcitrant and not willing to come to the bargaining table. So I think what leaders have found over the years is that nobody comes out of these things looking all that great, especially when you have a protracted shutdown. You know, in recent years, we've seen a lot of, 2-hour shutdowns, a day shutdown, but we're now sort of into, approaching record territory, and there is no end game in sight right now. So it's kind of this stalemate, a game of chicken, if you will. Democrats are trying to flex their new leadership muscle and say, we're not going to give in the first time, in this first fight that we have with the president as the House majority. And the president is saying that he staked his presidency on this issue. He's not backing down. A lot of Republicans who are not necessarily in love with the wall, but also don't want to abandon the president or their base, are sort of trapped in the middle, and it's really hard to see where things go from here.
Nancy, we got to wrap this up, but I really, listening to you provide this analysis for us, I just got to ask, what is the answer to people who will say the Republicans controlled all three branches of government for the last 2 years and we're not able to get this down, get this done? What's the answer to people who are sort of scratching their heads and wondering about that?
Well, the answer is that the next election isn't for almost 2 years. And so Republicans feel that they've got some wiggle room. Even if they get the blame for this shutdown, they've gotten the blame for other shutdowns and gone on to do quite well in elections that are a year or two down the road. People forget. Other things happen. And so they think that for now, even though, yes, they did control the White House and Congress, they are still going to stick by the president and hope that if they do get the lion's share of the blame for this, that people will have forgotten and have moved on to other things by the time they go to the polls in 2020.
All right. And of course, I meant the branches of government, the executive branch and the legislative branch, not the judiciary. But
we know
Nancy,
what you meant.
Yeah,
we know
thank you very much. I love you guys. Thanks, Nancy.
You're welcome.